Hi, Mrs. Lemons here to talk about trade, and specifically the concepts of absolute and comparative advantage. These concepts are very important in both AP Macroeconomics and AP Microeconomics. And what economists like to do to model these concepts is basically look at a simplified example involving two countries. In this case, we've got tea land and woodland, and also only looking at two goods. So in this case, we've got corn and wheat only. So here we go. To find the absolute advantage, all you need to do is see which country can produce more of a certain good with the same amount of resources. So we're looking for both countries, we're looking at their output per worker per day, so we know it's the same amount of resources for each country. So let's focus on corn first and see who can produce more. And in this case, tea land can produce 1,200 bushels of corn per worker per day, whereas woodland can only produce 600 bushels of corn. So that means that for that reason, tea land has the absolute advantage in corn production. Now when we look at wheat, the situation is a little bit different, because as you can see, both countries produce exactly the same amount of wheat. That is all they're capable to do, and since neither country can produce more, that means that no one, in this example, has the absolute advantage in terms of production of wheat. Next, we've got comparative advantage, which has a few more steps, so let me walk you through those. To find the comparative advantage, first you need to find the opportunity costs of production of each good in each country. So I find it useful to kind of make another grid on my paper, and what I do is I focus on one country at a time and I calculate both opportunity costs, and then I move on to the other country. So let's focus on tea land first. And as we can see in our example, tea land can produce either 1,200 bushels of corn or 300 bushels of wheat. So basically what that means is that 1,200 bushels of corn is the same as 300 bushels of wheat in terms of using our factors of production to produce output. So all we have to do is set them equal to each other, and then you can use algebra to find the opportunity costs, which is basically the value of the next best alternative. And since in this example these countries are only producing two things, the next best alternative of producing corn is wheat, and vice versa. So let's find the opportunity cost of producing 1 bushel of corn in terms of wheat. All we have to do to find that is get corn by itself, and to do that we just have to divide both sides by 1,200, and we will get that 1 corn equals 1/4 of a bushel of wheat. So now we can kind of compare apples to apples, if you will, or 1 bushel of corn to 1 bushel of corn when we do the same thing for woodland, but we'll get to that in a second. So in tea land, every bushel of corn they produce, to do so, they're giving up 1/4 of a bushel of wheat. And we'll do the same procedure to find the opportunity cost of wheat. So to get wheat by itself, we're going to divide both sides by 300. And we will find that 1 bushel of wheat equals 4 bushels of corn. So to produce just 1 bushel of wheat, tea land has to give up 4 bushels of corn. So that's the opportunity cost. Now that we know the opportunity cost in tea land, we can calculate the opportunity costs in woodland and compare them to find the comparative advantage. So in woodland, they can produce 600 bushels of corn or 300 bushels of wheat. So if they choose to produce 600 bushels of corn, they're giving up 300 bushels of wheat. And since these numbers are different than in tea land, that's why we're getting 1 bushel of corn and one bushel of wheat by itself, so that we can compare the two accurately, basically. So let's find opportunity cost of corn, get that by itself, divide both sides by 600 to get that 1 corn equals half a bushel of wheat. And then we'll calculate for wheat. So we'll divide both sides by 300. And we'll see that 1 bushel of wheat equals 600 divided by 300, which is 2 bushels of corn. So now all we have to do is compare the opportunity costs in each country and see whose opportunity costs are lower. So basically we're going to see who is giving up less to produce each good. And according to principles of economics, that is the country who should specialize in the production of the good, the country who's giving up less. So looking at corn, we can see that tea-land gives up 1/4 of a bushel of wheat, whereas woodland gives up half a bushel of wheat. So 1/2 is more than 1/4. That means that tea-land has a comparative advantage in corn because they are giving up less wheat to produce every bushel of corn. And then when we look at wheat, we can see that woodland is only giving up 2 bushels of corn, whereas tea-land's giving up 4. So since woodland is giving up less corn for every bushel of wheat, they have the comparative advantage in wheat. So woodland should specialize in wheat, and they should devote all of their production to only producing wheat. So in this example, in the world that only involves tea-land and woodland, there would be 300 bushels of wheat produced. And tea-land should specialize in corn because they give up less wheat to produce corn. And since they can produce 1,200 bushels of corn, that will be what is produced in this world. So since each country is only producing one thing, they have to trade. Woodland is going to have to import corn because they're only producing wheat, and tea-land is going to have to import wheat because they're only producing corn. And that's where terms of trade comes in, our last concept for today. Basically, with terms of trade, you want to choose a term of trade that is in between the opportunity costs of the two countries because that's going to be agreeable to both countries. So in this example, let's just focus on these last opportunity costs here, where we've got 4 bushels of corn as an opportunity cost for wheat and tea-land and 2 bushels in woodland. Basically, if the terms of trade were 3 bushels of corn for 1 bushel of wheat, both countries would be happy with those terms of trade because woodland, if they produce domestically, they only get 2 bushels of corn for every bushel of wheat. So if tea-land is willing to give them 3 bushels of corn for every bushel of wheat, they'll be happy because that's more than they could get domestically. And tea-land is happy to give up 3 bushels of corn for every bushel of wheat because if they produce domestically, they would have to give up more than that. They'd have to give up 4 bushels of corn. So everyone wins with trade. And to choose the terms of trade, you just choose a number that is between the opportunity costs of production for both countries. So thanks for joining me today for Comparative and Absolute Advantage.